Welcome, I'm Catherine Hadro, and this is EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Pro-life protections. Senator Bill Cassidy, a medical doctor, tells us why he signed a Senate letter to President Trump on maintaining a ban on aborted fetal tissue for COVID-19 research. A rising risk. There is growing pressure on the FDA to relax restrictions on the abortion pill during the coronavirus pandemic. We discuss why that's dangerous. And a haven of hope. Good Counsel Homes continues to take in homeless pregnant women in New York, where the pandemic rages on. Pro-life leaders in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate have sent 3 recent letters to the Trump administration, urging the administration to maintain pro-life protections during the search for the treatments and cures for COVID-19. 2 letters were sent to President Donald Trump calling for a continued enforcement on his fetal tissue regulations. And the 3rd letter from pro-life lawmakers was sent to the FDA, urging the FDA to uphold and enforce the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy associated with chemical abortions. The letter on the fetal tissue ban was signed by 35 senators and refutes a request by 15 pro-abortion state attorney generals who are requesting waivers to the ban on fetal tissue for coronavirus research. The letter states in part, quote, "The facts show that aborted fetal tissue from ongoing abortions has never been used in the production of a single vaccine, and most vaccines today use more efficient, modern cell lines and production techniques. Notably, the few attempted transplants of aborted fetal tissue have made most patients worse, not better." As mentioned, that specific letter was signed by 35 pro-life senators, including Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who joins us now via Skype. Senator, thanks for being here. In addition to being a signee of this letter, you are also a medical doctor. What is your perspective on this push for the use of tissue from aborted babies in COVID-19 research?
The first perspective has to be one of life. We must value life and have an ethic of life. Now, if you will, there's a certain irony. Those who advocate using aborted fetal tissue propose that this is the only way to preserve life from COVID-19, the ravages, if you will. On the other hand, you can get to the same end of finding those cures to prevent COVID-19 without sacrificing the most basic fundamental, which is that we should value life. There's an irony in their position. They're willing to sacrifice life on a pretense that we need to do so to save life. We who are pro-life would say, no, we value life, and we can save lives from COVID-19 without devaluing the life of the unborn.
That being said, Senator, to Americans who think the cure to COVID-19 might come from aborted fetal tissue research, what do you want to clarify to them?
You know, there are ways to get to the same end without using aborted tissue. It has been clearly established that stem cells can be formed, if you will, when we're born, there's cells that can go any direction. And they may end up as a piece of bone, as a piece of liver, as a piece of brain. They are called pluripotent. They can go in any direction whatsoever. You can get those kind of stem cells to evolve, if you will, into the specialized tissue that you need for different medical scientific purposes. And you don't have to get those from aborted children. So there's other sources of this tissue, aside from what I just described, that can replace the need to take tissue from aborted fetuses.
We all want to see a cure for COVID-19. That's not even a question. But can you speak to how we can't allow this high-stakes time to compromise our values?
Well, clearly people will use any excuse to advance an agenda, whether it is valid or not. And if we're speaking of a cure, of course, we're speaking most likely of a medication. And those medications will not come from aborted fetal tissue. It'll come from knowing the virology of the virus and how we're going to interrupt it, just as we've done with HIV, hepatitis B, and other viruses, and how to stimulate the antibodies that would then block the virus from entering our cells. We can do that without aborted tissue, and that would both preserve our culture of life and respect life, both in terms of the people who we protect from COVID-19, but also the means by which we achieve that protection.
As I mentioned, you are a signee of this letter to the Trump administration on upholding these pro-life protections. Senator, can you lay out the kind of pro-life protections that can be ensured in coronavirus research?
Well, this sort of thing, this ban, if you will, of using tissue from aborted fetuses is a key portion of that. But then after that, I think we have to say we are pro-life. We are all about saving lives. And so we want to prevent the aborted fetus from, if you will, there being an incentive to abort beyond that which currently exists, but also then put in those systems which would, whatever cures we get, deliver those cures as quickly and as affordably, even for free, to those who would otherwise protect. It always makes our case a little bit more when we both protect the life of the unborn, but we also defend the life of those who are born, if you will. So the folks who advocate for using fetal tissue say, this is necessary to save lives of those who are already born. We would say, no, we can respect the life of the unborn, but we can still deliver life-saving vaccines and cures to those who are walking on the streets. We need to also emphasize that to give credibility for our defense of the unborn.
What is your message to the Trump administration on this right now?
Respect life. Respect life for those who are in the womb. Respect life for those who have left the womb. And I think the Trump administration is attempting to do that.
And finally, do you have any last words you want to share to your constituents and to our viewers right now in the midst of this pandemic?
Yeah, first, I thank your viewers for respecting so much about the issue of life. It is your steadfastness that has just kept this the culture, the conscience of the culture awakened as to why this is an issue. I thank you so much for doing so. You influence. Please continue that influence.
Well, thank you so much for your pro-life leadership and for joining us on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, thank you and stay safe.
You too. Thank you.
We're going to stay on this topic with our next guest. Autumn Christensen is the policy director of the Susan B. Anthony List, and she joins us via Skype. Autumn, we've seen pro-life members in Congress send 3 recent letters to the Trump administration about maintaining pro-life protections during the coronavirus pandemic. Why is this necessary in the first place?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. You know, this old adage that we should never allow a crisis go to waste, well, that's exactly what the abortion industry is looking to do, to exploit this corona crisis and compound it with an abortion crisis. One way that they're trying to do that is that they're calling for taxpayer funding for research involving human fetal tissue. Another way is that they want to lift safeguards designed to protect women from the dangerous aspects of chemical abortion. And as that pressure builds, it is just so encouraging to see so many members of Congress rally behind legislation and also sending a letter to the president that says that they support these common sense protections for women and also the prohibition on taxpayer funding for human fetal tissue research.
Autumn, what misconceptions do you want to clear up when it comes to aborted fetal tissue and finding a COVID-19 cure?
It's a great question. So a year ago, this administration, a little less than a year ago, this administration issued a policy that they would no longer fund human fetal tissue research at the NIH and curtail other funding streams for research that involves the aborted baby parts, body parts of unborn children. And of course, there are those in the scientific world and those in the abortion lobby who want to see that funding flow. And so they have made some pretty wild claims about fetal tissue research, claiming that it's necessary. The reality is that the many promising studies out there to treat COVID-19, none use human fetal tissue. And even with vaccines, while some use a very old cell line that was derived using human fetal tissue decades ago, there are much better and newer ways to grow human vaccines that do not involve human fetal tissue. So, you know, they're looking to use this as a chance to expand human fetal tissue research funding, but the fact is that it's not only unethical, but also unnecessary.
Autumn, we saw a bicameral letter sent to the FDA about maintaining restrictions on the abortion pill or chemical abortions. We're going to delve into the dangers of chemical abortions a bit later in the show, but Autumn, what should pro-lifers know about pressure being put on the FDA right now concerning abortion pills?
So the FDA currently has policies in place that are designed to protect women. A woman who undergoes a chemical abortion could have severe hemorrhaging. She could have severe adverse effects if she has a ectopic pregnancy, which is a pregnancy that's implanted outside of the womb and can be very dangerous. So the current policy is that physicians or other healthcare providers who prescribe a chemical abortion have to be the ones to dispense it. And what this does is it ensures that that woman has a relationship with a healthcare provider and prevents mail order abortion. Of course, the abortion lobby would love to mail abortion pills to women across the country who would then be left to suffer an abortion alone at home, and it would turn every post office into an abortion center. Currently, that's not allowed under FDA regulations, and it's just very important for the administration to maintain those safeguards, and we're so glad to see members of Congress standing behind the FDA and encouraging them to retain these necessary safeguards.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that insight and for reminding us, the pro-life movement, to be on high guard right now during this pandemic. Autumn Christensen, Policy Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you. The Save Moms and Babies Act would prevent the FDA from approving new chemical abortions, put an end to labeling changes for existing drugs, and ban abortionists from dispensing those drugs remotely. If made into law, this bill would stop the expansion of chemical abortions, which are on the rise today. The Save Moms and Babies Act is a common sense bill that would protect both women and unborn children. And that brings us to this week's call to action. Tell your senator to co-sign the Save Moms and Babies Act. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to deliver your message straight to your senator. Once at our website, type in your basic information and we will tailor this message to your specific senator and send it straight to them. Again, chemical abortions are dangerous for mothers and they end the lives of unborn children. The Save Moms and Babies Act would help protect both. Tell your senator to co-sign this common sense bill by going to ProLifeWeekly.com. Abortion advocates are using the coronavirus pandemic to push for looser restrictions on chemical abortions. Chemical abortions, also referred to as medication abortions or abortion pills, take place after a pregnant woman takes two pills, mifepristone and misoprostol, which kill her unborn child. The FDA requires the first of those pills to be administered by a certified prescriber and bans the sale of this drug by mail. Abortion advocates have long called for these regulations to be eliminated, and we're seeing a renewed push for this during the coronavirus pandemic. A coalition of Democratic attorney generals recently called on the Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA to remove the regulation, saying it is, quote, outdated. And even the New York Times editorial board recently called for making abortion pills available by mail, writing, quote, given the coronavirus pandemic, it is incumbent on the FDA to relax its regulation on mifepristone, at least temporarily. Joining us now via Skype is Dr. Christina Francis. She is chair of the board of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Dr. Francis, first off, can you outline the unique risks associated with abortion pills, also known as chemical abortions?
Certainly. This is a medication that definitely has dangers associated with it, which is why the FDA, when they originally approved this medication, put those REMS or those regulations in place to govern it. We know that they have immediate complications of hemorrhage, the possibility of infection, and the possibility of failure or where the pregnancy doesn't fully pass from the medication, then leading to the requirement for sometimes emergent surgery for that woman because of either ongoing bleeding or the risk of infection.
Do you suspect, Dr. Francis, we'll find out there was a rise in chemical abortions during this pandemic?
I definitely think that we will see a rise in that. Unfortunately, women are being influenced by fear right now, and this is being perpetuated by the abortion industry. women are certainly, all of us are facing uncertain circumstances, but I know that there are a lot of women out there that find themselves pregnant right now and unsure of what they're going to do. Maybe they're facing the fact that they don't have a job right now, or they're struggling to put food on the table. But this is not a reason why we should be pushing women into abortions. And with many states suspending elective surgical procedures, we are hearing reports of more and more women obtaining medication abortions, as well as this push, as you said, by the abortion industry to release restrictions that are there. And those restrictions, let's make it clear, those restrictions are there to protect women from the potential dangers of this medication. The danger of using medication abortion through the mail or via telemedicine, where maybe the woman speaks with someone over a video call but doesn't actually see a physician in person, is that there are very strict regulations around how this is used for a reason. We know that the farther along in pregnancy this is used, the higher the risks, specifically the risk of hemorrhage and what we would call an incomplete abortion, where the woman doesn't pass all of the pregnancy from a result of the drugs. And also, these women need to be seen and screened to be sure that they actually have a pregnancy inside of the uterus as opposed to an ectopic pregnancy. If that goes undiagnosed, that could be lethal for her.
Do you think then there are additional risks to women who take the abortion pill during a pandemic and the fact we have these stay-at-home orders and so many places are closed right now?
Well, absolutely. This pandemic adds a whole new level of risk. One of the things that I have seen during this time is, women being packed into the waiting rooms of abortion facilities, and obviously that doesn't allow for the social distancing that we've all been told that we need to practice. The other thing is that we know that up to 7% of women will require surgeries to complete their abortion after taking the pills for a medication abortion. And so oftentimes those women will need to present to emergency rooms. And we know that emergency rooms are really the portal of entry into a hospital for patients with COVID. So that potentially puts the woman at risk of being exposed to COVID, and also adds additional strain on our healthcare system as they're trying to take care of the patients that are coming in with COVID. And then if we are adding more and more of these women needing care in our emergency rooms during this time, then obviously that puts her potentially at risk.
We're seeing, as we've been talking about, abortion advocates put the pressure on the FDA, though, to loosen restrictions on the abortion pill during this pandemic. Speaking as a medical doctor, what is your response to that?
Well, I think this is absolutely the wrong decision to make. And, this was actually something that was already going on prior to the COVID pandemic, but the push for the release of these regulations has increased even more as abortion proponents try to convince women through fear, I think, during this time that these are necessary procedures. We know that abortion is not healthcare. Does not treat a disease, and it actually has very significant risks for women. And so, women have the right to excellent healthcare even during a pandemic, and releasing regulations that were put into place for the protection of women is not the way to provide them with the healthcare that they need. In fact, it's putting their lives in danger. And I think women have the right to know this information. They have the right to know that these regulations are not in place in order to restrict them from being able to get an abortion, but they're in place so that if they do make that choice, that it can be done in the safest way possible for them. And again, having someone either send this to them through the mail or even talking to them over video, they have no way of confirming how far along in a pregnancy that woman is. And we know that especially at about 8 weeks, those risks start to go up, but especially after 10 weeks, those risks go up significantly. The risk of hemorrhage that might require a blood transfusion or, again, emergency surgery. And so, what we will see if these regulations are released, we will see an increase in the number of women that are having complications, potentially even life-threatening complications from their abortions.
Dr. Francis, sometimes we hear stories about women who take the first of 2 doses of the abortion pill and she regrets it. What advice would you have for a woman in that circumstance?
Sure. Well, I have had patients that have been in that very situation. We know that a lot of women make the decision to have an abortion under duress or because they find themselves in a crisis situation, such as the situation we find ourselves in now. And then after she takes that first pill, maybe she starts to think about the decision that she made. I had one person tell me that after she had taken that first pill, it was almost like this cloud of uncertainty had been lifted, and she was able to think clearly for the first time since she'd found out she was pregnant. And when she was able to think clearly, she realized that that was not a decision that she wanted to have made, and so she wanted a way to change that. And thankfully, we now have a protocol in place called Abortion Pill Rescue, where if women change their minds after they've taken that first pill, they can call the network that's out there that will get them connected with a physician in their area who can try to help them reverse the effects of that first drug, the mifepristone. It's not 100%, but the studies that we have on it right now show that we've got about a 65% success rate of being able to save her child. And I'm happy to say that I've had one successful rescue, and it was one of the best deliveries I've done in my career.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. That's hopeful as well. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight, Dr. Christina Francis of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, a pro-life group is serving pregnant women in need in the middle of a coronavirus hotspot. Hear what Good Counsel Homes is doing to serve women and babies in need in the New York City region. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer called abortion procedures life-sustaining during a recent interview. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Governor Whitmer was interviewed on the Axe Files podcast last week, a podcast hosted by David Axelrod, who is a former President Barack Obama advisor. In the interview, Whitmer said the argument that abortion is an elective procedure is, quote, ridiculous. Take a listen to what else Whitmer had to say.
You know, a woman's health care, her whole future, her ability to decide if and when she starts a family is not an election. It is a fundamental to her life. It is life-sustaining.
Life-sustaining. The governor called abortion life-sustaining. The Michigan Catholic Conference was quick to respond and called Governor Whitmer's comments, quote, removed from reality. Abortion, by its very definition, is a life-ending procedure. It was designed to intentionally kill a human person's life. During the coronavirus pandemic, Whitmer has allowed abortions to continue in her state. So in Michigan, those desperately needed surgical masks and gloves are being used to end the lives of the unborn instead of going to the actual life-sustaining efforts instead. For this week's Pro-Life Focus, we want to spotlight hope in the midst of heartbreak. Good Counsel Homes is a group of Catholic maternity homes for parenting and pregnant women and children before and after birth. They have 2 locations in New York City and 2 outside New York City, which has become the coronavirus hotspot in the United States with the most number of cases. Good Counsel Homes tells us they want women to know that even now, and especially now during the pandemic, they are open and here to help. Good Counsel Homes, founded in 1985, takes in any pregnant woman, no matter where she is from or whether she has children already. The co-founder and president, Christopher Bell, tells us he and his team are taking the coronavirus seriously. They are keeping their homes extra clean and placing anyone who has symptoms in a quarantine room. But Good Counsel Homes fears this time of uncertainty will drive women to abortion.
And right now, because of the coronavirus, unfortunately, we're seeing less phone calls, less emails for help. My staff fears that a lot of women just don't think anybody will take them in right now or help them in their situation. But our doors are open. They've always been open. During the HIV/AIDS crisis, we took in women in that situation before anybody really knew how serious and how deadly that disease was. And right now, from the beginning of the coronavirus crisis and being at the epicenter here in New York, we're keeping our doors open. If a woman calls, if she emails, and she's pregnant and needs to come in, we'll take her in.
Here is how you can get connected to Good Counsel Homes. You can call their 24/7 helpline at 800-723-8331 or find more information on their website, goodcounselhomes.org. Christopher Bell also told me that Good Counsel Homes had to cancel 2 major fundraising dinners in New York because of the coronavirus, and their food budget for moms is very low right now. Thank you, Good Counsel Homes, for your commitment to mothers and babies in need, a beautiful example of how the pro-life movement continues to shine forth hope. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Now, you may have noticed this show looked a little bit different. Well, there's a reason why. Instead of coming to you from our EWTN DC studio like I usually do, I'm coming to you from the Hadro household. Here's a behind-the-scenes look of the at-home setup. In an effort to keep as few as people as possible in the studio during the coronavirus, our incredible EWTN DC team set this up. This network is taking great means to protect our health and safety during this uncertain time while still staying true to our mission and committed to serving you, the viewer, with the truth. Until next time, be sure to find us on social media at EWTN Pro-Life or send us an email at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.